Island is out today, and I'm happy to say that Owen Pallett joins me now. Owen, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How are you doing?
Thank you for asking. I'm doing well. It's such a strange time to be doing anything at all, much less, releasing a record that existed long before this pandemic. How are you feeling putting it out?
I'm pretty happy about it. It kind of gave me a bit of purpose. We were originally going to be putting it this summer to begin with, so it didn't really change our schedule. But I just kind of assumed, I guess, that we were not. But then when the label said no, we're going to go ahead with it, it definitely pulled me out of a kind of a 3 to 4 week early quarantine depression where I was just like, I don't know what to do with my time right now. So that was helpful.
Is it, I mean, you guess you would normally be touring it and normally be heading off on the road with it. But it is also, you're right, sort of a gift to give people something to take in while they're stuck at home.
For sure. I mean, I think people are relating to recorded music right now, like they find it pretty necessary. It's like it has become commodified over recent years, and yeah, I hope people will take the time to engage with it.
I'm curious about the process of this record, especially surrounding the use of the London Contemporary Orchestra. You
Mhm.
were able to perform with a symphony orchestra here right now, but there are limitations that places on you. If you're recording something by yourself, you're able to do it as many times as you want. You sort of have technology on your side, but this is sort of like bringing it back to like just a recorded performance, the idea of a record at all. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about your decision to work with them.
Um, well, I kind of actually have the opposite experience when I work with an orchestra. It feels very liberating to me. I do a lot of prep beforehand. I'm making sure that there's not going to be any confusion about what the parts are meant to indicate. And typically, when I do this, and I mean, it's work that I do for clients. Like this is primarily what I'm doing is providing orchestral services for clients and for film scores and stuff like that. So, in a way, it's kind of a really wonderful thing to just be scoring for months and then have your parts and everything ready and just have it, bam, there's your record. It's ready. It's kind of like a really wonderful moment, like when you take a cake out of an oven. So, but
Right. I mean, I guess that makes sense to me. I would have thought, see, I would have thought the opposite. I would have thought that if you're in there by yourself with just your violin, you're able to sort of create the textures quickly, or you're able to react to moments very, very quickly. But it sounds like you said it is very liberating to work with an orchestra like this.
yeah, and also too, it's great that it just kind of forces you to accept this is how it's going to sound. Take it or leave it. So, but it's good. It's like when you're working with a good orchestra, they're flexible. You can provide them with notes, make changes as you want. It's like, and especially having the opportunity. I'd never recorded at Abbey Road before. I have had some large clients and worked in big London-based studios, both for film and for on albums. But Abbey Road specifically, I've never worked at. So this is my first time, and maybe my last time. It does seem to be kind of it's an increasingly dear expense to kind of use an orchestra on a record, especially one in as nice a studio as Abbey Road. But I do hope that I get to go back. It was really lovely.
Did it open up avenues to you creatively that perhaps you hadn't pursued in the past in your solo work?
Which do you mean? Like working
Working
with
with an
large
orchestra as
orchestras?
opposed to working on your own. Yeah. In terms of your
Well, I
solo
mean,
work.
it's stuff that I've been doing for since my mid 20s. I think the first big project that I had was Arcade Fire's second album, Neon Bible. There was orchestra on that, and around that time too, the Last Shadow Puppets first album, Age of the Understatement. And both of those were recorded with large orchestras. And I think at a certain point, when I was making Heartland, I was like, if I'm getting good at this, maybe I should start to afford myself the same consideration. It is, and I mean, I tend to kind of like expend my advance from the record label entirely on these sessions because they're not cheap. But I think it's important. I think it's worth it, and I really, I love the medium, and so I'm hoping that I can, continue making records in it.
Since your last record, I know you've had an Oscar nomination and you got to attend the Oscars. What is that like?
It was surprisingly kind of boring. Like more boring than you'd expect. Like there was just a lot of standing and a lot of waiting, you know. And people actually joke about it. It's just kind of like if like when I think I don't remember who it was who said it, but I think it was Buffy St. Marie who was just like, bring a sandwich, make sure you bring some food because you just sit there and watch it for a long time. I mean, it was nice to, you know, get a nice suit for the occasion. It was a kind of a nice experience. Um, and the best anecdote that I have about the whole experience is actually when we lost, because they separate the nominees into two boxes, one on the left side of the stage and one on the right side of the stage, and we don't know who's going to win. Like they don't inform you in advance. So Will Butler and I were over on stage left, and we were sitting with Alexandre Desplat. And when they announced Steven as the winner, Alexandre leaned over and put his hands on our shoulders and said, "So long, losers," and then he left. It was great. Yeah, it was a really funny moment. He at that
It's been
time
really
he had,
amazing. Go ahead. Go ahead.
sorry, I guess there's a delay. At that time, he had not himself yet won an Oscar, though he'd been nominated many, many times. I think he would win next year or something like that. But yeah, so I think he was used to showing up, losing, going home, and so it was a bit of a joke to him at this point.
It's interesting to hear you talk about your artists and how many clients you've worked with, and using even the term clients, because I think ever since I first came across your music, you know, you've delved into doing all this other kind of work that you may have been doing before, but I wasn't aware of it. You know, working with folks like, you know, Frank Ocean and Titus Andronicus, doing, you know, punk rock, and Taylor Swift. How have you found working for other artists and helping them sort of realize their vision helps you with your own music when you come back to it?
Um, it's very actually seldom that I really like learn something from a client, like that I really am working on. And so I'm
Really?
like, oh, here's this great idea. Yeah, it's not that everyone out there is stupid or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's most of the time it's just a kind of a collaborative thing that's very focused on the project. Um and yeah, but the times when I do really learn something, it's oftentimes just regarded to other aspects of music production, you know. Working with Magical Clouds, for example, was really useful because I learned a lot from Matt and Devin about production, just like the way they record vocals and stuff like this, and that was really really useful to me. But as an arranger, no, I'm fine that I kind of learn more just from investigation, like continuing to absorb like all the vast amounts of chamber music that's out there that I haven't investigated. You know what I mean? Like I've until this year never listened to Korngold. I'm listening to Korngold. You know, stuff like that. That's been kind of ultimately much more educational.
Is there a, is there is there a genre of music say, that you find particularly challenging more than others to exist within?
Challenging, how, like for me or for like
Yeah,
as a
like I can
listener
only
or as a
imagine. Like,
producer?
no, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying in terms of. I think what people are looking for when they bring you into a project is you, as opposed to you trying to fit
Oh,
in within, you know, their world. But I wanted to know if that's ever a challenge to you. Is there a particular genre of music where you stepped in and gone like, I'm not entirely sure what to do here?
um, no, not really. I think, in fact, the most challenging would be kind of more pop oriented stuff, like top 40 almost stuff. That can be challenging just because A, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and B, you know, they are looking for something very specific. Like, I'd say probably one of the most challenging records I worked on was Robbie Williams, um, just because of that fact. Like, this is music that's going to be played on the radio. You need to make sure that the strings are fitting the mix really well. That can be the most challenging. I haven't ever worked on a rap record. I did do some contract work for Kanye at a certain point. And I have collaborated with, you know, Rolly Cadence Weapon and stuff. I guess I have worked on a rap record because I did do some tracks with him. But yeah, no, it's all kind of the same stuff. I use the same program, the same 12 notes, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like such a lovely career, you know, being able to work with all these sort of geniuses and then being able to go back and make your own music as well.
It's really interesting because I kind of feel both in my personal life and in speaking with like members of my family that uh, people have a kind of like a second from their secondary perspective, they think that there's something rather glamorous about what I do, but it really isn't. It's very it's about as glamorous as working in a restaurant, you know? It's like even today when I mentioned to a friend that I was doing some press, I was like, "Oh, it's such a nice day. I wish I could be outside." And he said, "Oh, but you're doing press. How exciting." And I'm like, I'm like, "Really? It's just to me this is just like you're a customer and I'm serving you some eggs and trying to smile and keep on a positive attitude." Like I
Yeah.
don't find I mean, there are definitely some moments. It was really exciting to go to Frank Ocean's 30th birthday. It was really nice to get emails from musicians whose opinions I really respect when they like something that I've done. But in general, it is quite lonely. It's just me working at the piano and my computer and just tracking stuff over and over again. It can be actually quite isolating. um, I've even spoken at length with other musicians because I don't think that people really understand how freelance musicianship is an incredibly isolating procedure, not just because of the amount of time you need to spend in composing and practicing, but it's just you can't, like, I mean, you have to be very, very committed to listening and focused, and so it doesn't allow for a lot of distraction. There's some days that I really do wish that I was employed as a carpenter or a plumber or something like that, something also more physical that involved actually talking to other people. It would kind of maybe feed my mental health a little in more positive ways.
And those are both things that have a yes or a no behind them. Those are two things that have a good or a bad. You either fill up a tire or you don't fill up a tire. You don't interpret filling up a tire poorly according to somebody else. I understand what you mean.
Yeah, and I mean the scale to which too music is judged. It can be very difficult. Music is culture, and culture itself is meant to be a reflection of the subconscious desires of the public. And certainly more recently, we are in the middle of a class war. We are on the verge of like seeing a total revolution in the United States. It can make things very complicated, for and just what is gauged as good music is not necessarily the same metrics as like the way that you would gauge a good piece of pie or like an excellent building, or something like that. It's a little more kind of abstract and kind of sometimes difficult to navigate for sure.
Well, what's particularly difficult to navigate?
I don't know. It's kind of a hard question to answer. I can't answer that question speaking for myself because I don't want to provide examples in which I might come across as ungrateful, and I don't want to
Yeah.
speak for other people. But there are certain times where I'm just kind of like I'm looking at something that somebody is being given a hard time for, like a musician who, has said X, Y, or Z in an interview, and people who are coming for them, and I'm just kind of like, really, guys, like that's a lot. You guys have some real high standards here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I relate to what you said earlier too. I was talking about this earlier today in that, I'm really incredibly fortunate that I get to talk to kind of pretty incredible people, and oftentimes people I have great regard for. But it also
Mm.
can become just my job. I can come home and say, well, how was your day? And I can say, well, I spoke to, this person who won this and this person who's releasing that, and Owen Pallett and all this other stuff. And I try to remind myself that a Wednesday for me is someone else's three best days of their lives. But I'm always trying to figure out accepting the fact that my life has become pretty wild and pretty exceptionally interesting in the way I wanted it to turn out, and also being okay with the fact that it is my job, it is my day, it is something I have to do, and it is kind of lonely. I'm generally in a room by myself. I understand what you mean about not wanting to lose perspective on gratitude while also trying to remember how kind of remarkable things can be.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look at this rapport that we have having first met each other and how much of this is performance. You know what I mean? It's like, could you call me for a favor tomorrow? It's like, well, you could, you can call me anytime if you need anything. But it's very sometimes working in media, people don't really actually understand, that there are like things like I was actually just saying to my friend earlier that there are certain things that are so incredibly rewarding and valuable. Like there's really nothing better than playing, for me at least, than playing a show and feeling like I really did a good job. Like personally, like regardless of what the audience thinks, me feeling like I, put forth something that was really meaningful. And that is incredibly, incredibly important to me. But there's so many other aspects of it that people think are exciting. Like I might say, oh, I have to go and play a show in Vienna tomorrow, and people are like, ooh, how fancy. And I'm like, I'm not looking forward to it. And they're just kind of like, oh, why? Like they're getting on my case because they think that something is glamorous is really not all that glamorous. I tend to describe touring to people as kind of like it's just like having a normal day job, except you have to commute for 8 hours to get there. And that's kind of accurate. It's kind of like what it is. I think too, it's just like when you do start touring and you do start playing shows in your early 20s, it's the bomb. It's the best. Your body can just take all manner of alcohol and drugs you throw into it. And, you
Yeah.
know, the concept of like promiscuous behavior is still exciting to you. And cities are new and you want to explore them. And then by the time you're like 26 or something like that, you're like, wow, this is really hard on my back. Like, this is actually kind of
Yeah.
giving me a bit of a pot belly. Yeah. It's far more challenging than people, I think, really understand, and isolating too. So yeah, I have sympathy for you.
I I have sympathy for you. I
Well,
had
nice.
a friend who I played music with used to say the greatest thing about going on tour was telling people you were going on tour.
Mm. Yeah, it makes
That was
people.
like the
Yeah, it's
coolest thing about it.
man. I'll tell you, there was like 3 years where it was like every time I came off a tour, it was like age 26 to 29. I felt like I was having social whiplash because I'd come back and I'd go to these parties and I'd be hanging out with my friends who'd all been hanging out with each other for the past 3 months while I was away, getting all the gossip, all the stuff had happened. And it got to a point after me just being away all the time where it would like I'd show up at the party and they'd just be like, "So when are you going on tour again?" I'm like, "Guys, you're my
Yeah,
crew." Like
I
it can be
know.
really, yeah, it can just having to travel all the time can be pretty difficult. Yeah. But those days are a
I'm
little behind
I'm
me. I've got much more control over my touring schedule at this point. So,
I think I'm guilty of that myself. I think I was a little nervous to talk to you off the top of this because I just assumed you sort of existed in realms in which everyone around you spoke like a New York Times crossword clue, and people had opinions on Penderecki that I couldn't possibly understand. But you're right; it is largely an unglamorous world of hummus and vegetable plates.
yeah, no, it's true. Yeah. No, no, no. I'm quite lowbrow in my day-to-day movements and conversations. Don't worry.
I appreciate it. I'll try to lower my lexicon.
All
How
right.
have you been though? I know I've been reading about you talking about your mental health, and only as much as you want to talk about it. But I know the pandemic's been hard on a lot of people, myself included. How are you holding up?
It's been kind of interesting. I do struggle with the great with just what I generally kind of have been recently calling psychodivergence, because it doesn't really suggest an
Psychodivergence?
illness. Yeah, like a person who's sane and healthy is psychonormative, and people who are not are psychodivergent. Isn't that nice? It's like nicer
Yeah, I
than
like. I kind of. It's kind of a lovely. It's a lovely way
mentally
of putting it.
ill. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I
Right.
kind of, and also too, just because it is like difficult. It's difficult to define. It's a combination of outside factors, internal factors, combinations of medications I'm trying out, stuff like that. Whether or not I got exercise, how many cups of coffee I got. Like there's a lot of factors going on there. And I have been dealing with it. It's been a difficult few years, to be honest. The effect of the quarantine has been actually quite interesting, and I participate in a support group with other people who are prone to experiencing recurrent periods of distress as a result of some of them are just going through a hard time. Other people have kind of chronic mental health issues and stuff like this. But we recently had a conversation in this group where we're saying that a lot of us kind of actually feel a little more sane right now, just because the kind of like baseline level of anxiety and distress that many people who are, psychodivergent feel is kind of now being felt on a societal level. It's almost as like everybody's kind of come down to our not that great level. Almost swore on the air. I don't know if that's kosher on cue. But it's like everyone's kind of descended down into the garbage heap that we have come to call home. So there's a bit of
Yeah, I
bit
know.
there's a bit of
I found myself
bittersweetness to
giving
it.
people I found myself giving people advice on how to have panic attacks. And I never thought my panic attacks would be so helpful for people before.
No, for sure. And this is the thing. It's like I don't know if you've ever seen a therapist before, but like probably 3 out of the 4 therapists that I've seen have themselves come from a background of some sort of mental health issue. And what got them into therapy
Yeah.
was that they had an increased capacity for understanding and empathy for what the experience of being either in periodic or chronic states of distress actually is like. And so, yeah, we're here for you. The crazy people, we're here to be your buds. Welcome
Yeah,
home. Welcome
we've
to
been
our
through it.
level.
We've had it already. We can talk you through it. Oh no, don't
Yeah.
worry. You're just breathing heavily. You're not actually dying. Your brain just thinks you're dying. It's very similar, but it's not the same thing.
Well, also too, I mean, a lot of us have developed like very effective coping mechanisms of dealing with things, and we're kind of able to identify what is real and what is actually just kind of in your head. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just been good in general to kind of talk to people, and I'm not saying that I don't feel delighted by it. I don't feel happy about it. Because at the end of the day, when this quarantine's over, pretty much everyone's going to kind of get back to their normal lives, and I'm still going to be crazy. But it has been nice for me to kind of feel to some degree that I might be of use to people, close friends of mine who are going through shit, and so that's been good.
That's a beautiful way of thinking about it. Oh, and I enjoy talking to you.
I enjoyed talking to you too.
I hope soon it can be in real life, perhaps, as opposed to in our living rooms.
Sure, man. Well, I live in Parkdale. Anytime you want to come and meet me and my dog, I'm down by the water every day. So,
I'll go have a look for you. You're going to do
all right.
Polar Vortex. Can you tell us about the song?
Sure. Yeah. This is one of the first songs that I wrote for the record. I actually wrote this song back in 2015, 2016 or something. Um, it's got a really it's this song has kind of been a bit of a party trick because it's like, whenever people are passing around an acoustic guitar at a party and everyone's kind of groaning, it's like, oh great, we're gonna hear this song, and then I play this song and everyone's like, what is that? Because I wrote a song that works really well. So I'm really happy to play it. I recorded it a couple days ago actually when the light was a little better. But I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, and thanks so much.
Thank you.